Nicole Hancock, and I'm the outpatient dietitian for West Tennessee Healthcare. I'm actually stationed at Lyft, but I do come over here and I do cardiac rehab, and I see the NICU clinic and do different things like that. So I'm wear different hats all around the building. I am an insurance provider now, so for anyone who is curious about that, let me know and I can tell you a little bit more information about that. We've never had that before. From what I understand, none of the dietitians have ever been able to bill insurance for different consults, and that's something that I'm able to do at this time, and we've had really great success with reimbursement with it so far, which has been really nice. So do let me know if you have any questions about that, and I am super informal, so please ask questions as we go along. That way we make sure we get everybody's answered in the time that we have to be able to do this. Well, I brought up, I labeled it additives in our food. It is talking about specifically bromine and iodine replacement within the foods, within the bread specifically. This question came up actually at the Healthy Heights Fair, so I decided, well, let's just turn it into a class then, since it was something some people were interested in. Thought it might get you guys in here if it was actually something you wanted to know about. So what we're going to talk about today first is what is iodine and why is it in our breads. It is present in foods as iodide, so if you actually look at ingredients labels, you might not see the word iodine, you might actually see iodide. So just, it is the same thing, it's just different spellings of it, different verbiages for the exact same thing. Major function synthesis of the thyroid hormone thyroxine, or T4. Your RDA is about 150 micrograms per day. You're typically going to find it in dough conditioners, in your bakeries, your food colorants, and your iodized salt. Now, there is some research that is suggesting that iodized salt, once you take it and you oxygenize it for about 4 weeks, the iodine disappears. There's some of that kind of going around. So the real question is it really beneficial to do iodized salt or not do iodized salt? There's really not good evidence behind saying one versus the other. I will tell you salt in general is highly processed. So I highly recommend for my patients for them to actually go get real salt, which you're going to get in like crystallized format typically, like the Himalayan sea salt or different things like that. They're typically crystallized, but they aren't going to have iodine in them because that's not an additive. They're also not going to have potassium chloride in them as well either, but table salt has all those things. But you can mix up your own, but it's still a lot better option for you to get it as pure as possible. And typically you can find some of those things. Kroger's carrying more of it now, and then also Marshall surprisingly carries a lot of the what I call the off-the-wall type food products. They've got a couple of little aisles in the back there, so do check into that a bit more often as well. So foods with iodine, it's not just your dough, but now you're going to find it particularly in your dough conditioner, just in the bakery, not as much in your food items at the store, and we'll tell that why in just a second. But you can also find it in 1% milk, your Luna bars specifically, some of your soy protein bars, eggs, 1% cottage cheese, and then the mozzarella cheese as well too might have some other aspects of that iodine in there as well. So a lot of people have the issue with hypo or hyperthyroidism. We've got a lot of that kind of going around. Well, one of the things that some research is suggesting that helps with hypothyroidism is actually eliminating goitrogens out of the food, because this actually inhibits the iodine metabolism by the thyroid gland. So we're having some issues with saying, well, if I'm not getting enough iodine in and then I'm eating a lot of these foods at the same time, is it really causing that big of a problem? Again, research is very inconclusive, unfortunately, but this is just to give you some background information from it. I've had some hypothyroid patients who do eliminate some of these. Some have success, some do not. So I can't tell you 100% of the time it's going to work for everybody. But turnips, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli, rutabagas, and cassava, those are all ones that you can. We're really more worried about this in less developed countries, not as much in developed countries, and that's just because of the way they get their food versus how we can actually go through and treat our food to try and make sure that we don't have as many bad substances and toxins and things that are going into our body, hopefully. And we can get it hopefully from a local farmer that's actually treating their food very well, where in a less developed country, they're having a lot more of those problems come into play. So let's talk about potassium bromate. So we know about iodine, and that's being put in a lot of our foods, and that's something that our body does need. We have to have that. The problem is that a lot of our foods now are saying, well, I don't really want to use iodine. It's a little bit more expensive. like everything in the world. So we're going to replace it with something that maybe I can do more of that's less expensive, and I can make more money off of you for the same price because I can produce it cheaper. So that's what we're getting more into now with potassium bromate. It's a flour improver that acts as a maturing agent with your doughs, provides strength to the dough during late proofing and early baking. The World Health Organization, whenever they started doing some research on this, they were finding that it was causing kidney failure, cancer, and thyroid dysfunction by putting this bromate in there instead of having the iodine like what they actually needed to have in there. Now granted, most of their studies were being done on rats. They didn't have a ton of human studies, but at the same time they were still seeing that these were very prevalent in all of them across the board. So we were wanting to look at, well, is this in our food, is this not? Well, in the United States, they didn't pick up on it quite as fast as other countries did. But there's other things that bromate and bromide can actually be in. So it's not just food items. We're also talking about pesticides, plastics, different medications that you might take can actually have it in there as well. Your toothpaste, your mouthwash, your hair dyes, textile dyes, automobiles, fire retardants, hot tub and swimming pool treatments can all have these things in here. So it's not always about, am I getting it out of food and ingesting it that way? We can still absorb it through many, many other means, and we're still seeing a lot of the toxicity that can be coming from this as well too. So what does it do? Why is it a problem? Well, it collects in your adipose tissue and your organ fat specifically, and they've seen it in laboratory studies whenever they've done that on pigs, rats, and humans as well. So we're seeing absorption in all these areas, and it's just sitting there, and that's kind of where the problem's coming into play. And I wanted to read a couple of studies for you guys. One study showed 5 groups of 2 to 4 rats. They were fed brominated olive oil at levels of 15,000, 10,000, 5,000, 3,000, and 1,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Those rats receiving the 3,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight died by day 8. The ones who received the lowest level survived 10 days. And then no pathological lesions were found at autopsy when compared to control rats who received just plain olive oil. So it can be a problem that we're getting a lot in our bodies and we don't even have a clue about it. It was actually it was estimated that about 20% of the hospital admissions for acute paranoid schizophrenia in between 1920 and 1960 were actually bromide toxicity, but they were treating them as schizophrenic patients because of it. So there's a lot of misconception as to, well, what does it look like? What does it not look like? What are we even looking for in our foods? How do I even know if this even exists? Because right now, FDA is not banning it in the United States, but many, many other countries are banning it, specifically for reasons just like this. Some of the toxicity symptoms that you can see: skin rashes, severe acne, loss of appetite, stomach pain, fatigue, metallic taste in the mouth, and cardiac arrhythmias. So we're seeing that it can cause a lot of things that we see in a lot of other disease states as well too, or a lot of other problems. So are we treating things the way that we should be, when in reality we don't know how much have you even gotten in of this, because it was never something big to start looking for until recently it's becoming a bit more prevalent out in the public. It's not that it hasn't existed for a while, obviously back in the 20s, but it's still something that we didn't know a whole lot about at that time. This is what it's going to look like. So if you're going to see it, we always see like enriched white flour a lot or enriched wheat flour, but if you see enriched bromated flour, take it off. And I'll tell you, I went through because I have a lot of nutrition labels just in my office, and I went through any bread product I could find in my office, and I couldn't find bromated flour in any of it. However, we all know that manufacturing companies like to trick you. So the things at the very, very bottom of the list are the things that are the least amount in that product. Well, now they're saying that we can have it in our products here in the United States as long as it's only 15 parts per million. So a very, very low dose. But do we know, are they actually going to label it or are they not? Because, for instance, trans fat free, we know they don't have to label it if it's considered trans fat free, which is 0.5 grams or less per serving. So it's still in there, we just don't have to label it because they now have the qualifications of, well, I'm actually trans fat free, so I have to put it in there. So those are some of those other questions that we're really kind of working on. So it's another good reason just to say, should we buy processed food more often? No, we should really go towards fresh more often because we don't know exactly what all that manufacturing company could potentially be putting in that food for us. Now, there's also something called bromated vegetable oil, or BVO is another one. U.S. and Canada actually allows it in citrus-flavored beverages, so like Mountain Dew or like your lemon lime beverages, off-brand and regular brand as well too. Any of those citrus type ones, lemony, limey, oranges, that kind of stuff, they can have those 15 parts per million in there. And I'll be honest, I went and I looked, and they don't label it. There's nothing on the ingredients label that I could find that said BVO or bromated of anything, even potassium bromate. I was looking for any type of spelling I could potentially find. I couldn't find any of it on there. So do be aware that they allow it in there, whether they label it or whether they do not. Now, it's always your company's choice and your manufacturing company's choice to do it or not. Just because they're allowed doesn't mean that they will. Now, some will actually tell you, like Pepperidge Farms is an unbromated flour. Some of them will tell you that on there. We have unbromated flour in our product. They can be as honest as that with you, but again, they don't have to. It's just as long as they follow the FDA regulations pretty strictly. If they're going to put it in there, it can't be more than 15 parts per million, because you can't really detect it either in the body. So if you actually go and get a test done, you're not going to be able to detect 15 parts per million unless you had a large buildup for a long period of time. Then you might start to see some of that on lab results. Banned in more than 100 countries, though, the U.S. classifies it as a suspect. So they're not actually saying it's a harm, it's an issue right now, we can get away with it, especially if we keep it at a really, really low dose. Also found in other soft drinks, ice cream, some of your ices, and then baked goods as well. This is what you're going to see on there. It will actually say bromated vegetable oil. If it says BVO, then you know that that is the exact same product as well too. But you can see even on this, because it's 15 parts per million, it's the last thing on the ingredients label. So it is a very, very small amount, but they don't have to release that. Just like with gluten specifically, if it's very, very small amount, or if it's like gluten in a spice or something, they can still consider it a gluten-free product because they can have a very low amount in there. And that's what the new recommendation has been, that starting in August, all manufacturing companies had to abide by the rule, even though the rule passed last year. They had 1 year to actually put it into effect. Now, is FDA going to go through and check every single one of them? No, they're not. They're going to tell them, hey, this is what you got to do. You got to make sure that you're in guidelines by this time, so make it work, whatever that means for you. So that is one thing that is frustrating, especially for people who have these intolerances or these sensitivities, or if you already have some toxicity going on, we could be making a problem potentially worse by the end of it. And I wanted to tell you that another research article as well that I thought was interesting. Bromine estimation in human adipose tissue and other organ fats from Holland, Germany, and the United Kingdom revealed high levels of lipid-bound bromine in people of countries allowing usage of BVO as a food additive. Especially high levels were found in children younger than 15 years of age. They drink a lot of soda. So even that 15 parts per million for someone who drinks a lot of those citrus beverages, you can get a huge amount stored in that adipose tissue. And then that comes down to, okay, well, if I'm storing it in adipose tissue and I'm trying to lose weight, can I lose weight until the toxicity is gone? That's a great question. There's no research on it. I don't really know the answer to it, but it would be an interesting question to see, because part of what holds adipose tissue or what makes organs not work is how toxated they are. So if there's a huge toxicity within any of them, without detoxing it, you really can't allow it to be beneficial anymore. So that's why you see detoxes are so huge right now. But detoxes actually aren't meant for weight loss. They were never meant to, hey, go detox to lose weight. That was never supposed to be it. Now, some of them will cause a side effect of weight loss for individuals who might need to specifically detox the colon. But to detox like the liver or the kidney or any other organs, the spleen, any of those types of things, the side effect most likely will not be weight loss for those particular ones. But for ones who hold a lot in their colon or their intestines specifically, I do see a lot of weight loss with those individuals, but it wasn't meant to be, oh, let's go do this for weight loss. And I'll tell you, half the time I get them back in my office with them saying, I plateaued. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. You detoxed. You're done. So we now have to move on to something else to keep you from getting toxins again, and we have to move on from that. So what questions do you guys have about this topic, or are you curious about anything? No? I got my Healthy Heights credit. Yay! Well, if you guys do have any questions about this particular topic, about a different topic, feel free, ask me. But also, if you have any questions about the insurance aspect and referrals and different things like that, let me know as well. Okay? Thank you guys so much for coming. Yes?
Yeah. So you were talking about the peppers from saying, they'll say unbrominated, but does that mean that it doesn't have any at all, even the 15 parts per million?
Well, what they're saying is that they have unbrominated flour. So whether they have BVO oil, I don't know the answer to that one. They're just claiming that their flour, they didn't put potassium bromate in it. So.
And if it's like the start of gluten goes, if it's certified gluten-free, does that make a difference?
Not necessarily. Certified gluten now with FDA, with the new law passing, they can have, I believe it's 30% can be gluten in there, because what they've shown through research is that if it's 30% or less, then the individuals who are having celiac disease or having sensitivity to that gluten, like a gluten sensitivity, they aren't having flare-ups because of it. Now, that's not to say that gluten patients wouldn't, who need to have that out, because I have ones who, you know, it's in the air and they have a reaction to it, just like any severe allergy would. But that's what they're doing right now. So that's supposed to be the new law. Whether they do it or not and how long it takes before they get caught, that's a different question, unfortunately. So, what other questions do we have? I sure can. What I'll do is what I've done with my other presentations. I'll email them to Tiffany, and if you will, I can either do that, or if you'll put your email address beside whoever wants the actual presentation, then I can email that to you with no problem. So I've done that with other ones, so just make sure I get that email address before you leave. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate it.